What do you do when you have a story that excites you, but perfectionism keeps you from writing it? Hello everyone, my name is Tracy, also known as Inkbound Midnight on all platforms, and today I'm going to be talking to you guys about Project Risk as well as sharing some vulnerable aspects of my writing and editing process. Project Risk is basically an office romance. And one thing about me, I love all things romance. I love writing and reading and watching romance flourish in very high intensity environments. I love watching people fall in love in situations and settings where typically that isn't allowed. I love the aspect of secrecy. I love the aspects of, you know, high egos, deadlines, stakes, and unspoken rules. And so that is what very much inspired me to write this office romance story. And honestly, one thing about me, I feel like office romances create the perfect storm for romance to either bloom or explode, which is very much up my alley. And with my story, and with my characters, I wanted to create a character dynamic that I love and enjoy reading and seeing. You know, an egotistical man and a strong willed woman that's willing to put him in his place. Okay? And that is basically what the main pair of my story are all about. So, the female lead, her name is Shanice Renee Davis. And honestly, she has a very complex personality. That is one thing that I really emphasize in all of my stories. I really work hard on giving my characters depth and making them much more real and fleshing them out so that they can feel like real people. So with Shanice, I wanted to kind of give her a bit of sass, a bit of sarcasm, a bit of confidence, but I also wanted to have her have real flaws that I know a lot of women deal with, similar to myself. She has a lot of perfectionism tendencies, very high expectations of herself, and she's very driven, sometimes too driven, which can lead to obviously overworking and even high anxiety. I wanted Shanice to be a woman so strong and so determined that when something doesn't go her way, it can instantly cause her to crumble. And that is something that I very much relate to and something that I feel like I could very well convey and portray in my work. And so I wanted her to sometimes suffer in silence. I do like to torture some of my characters. Sorry, guys. But one thing about me and my stories, I do enjoy to kind of portray different sides of mental health. And I wanted to also show how sometimes when we place such high expectations on ourselves, that can lead to us crumbling in ways that we don't often think about. With Shanice, I wanted to kind of highlight the importance of mental health and the side effects of having such high expectations. So I like to show those behaviors through burnout, through sometimes being detached from her own body, her own appearance, letting herself go in certain aspects. And I wanted to very much just show how important it is to give ourselves grace and things like that. Sometimes I try to think of my characters and put them through situations that can be kind of like a lesson to other people, I suppose, if you think of it deeply enough. The main male lead, Eric Miller, he's this CEO hotshot. However, he is known for being a very unkind person, very egotistical, very full of himself. However, one thing that I often noticed in works that I read was that a lot of times some authors would give their male leads not a lot of depth and not a lot of kind of internal struggles and insecurities and flaws to make them feel like real people. And so I wanted to make Eric somewhat multidimensional, show him as not just a man that is strong with a very tough exterior, but someone that in certain situations can be vulnerable, can be hurt, can have certain traumas. I wanted Eric to have certain internal struggles that most people wouldn't know or see at first hand because of how well he composes himself. And someone like Shanice, who is so strong-willed, could be able to break that barrier that he has with most people, especially in the workplace. And I feel like a lot of times men care a lot about reputation, a lot about power, a lot about their place in society, and so they do not let themselves show certain emotions, show certain weaknesses. And I wanted to kind of convey some of the behaviors that I see in real life into Eric. So when it comes to writing men, it's something that I'm not the most well versed in. So I am oftentimes, when I'm reading books, I do write a lot of stuff down in my journal, and I keep tabs and I keep notes of just certain behaviors. Not all men are the same. However, I try to keep notes of male characters to see what I want to take and what I want to remove, and things that I like and things that I don't like. So Eric very much can be a man that has ego, pride, a man that can be very stern and firm. He's very driven. He knows how to take initiative. The kind of male qualities that you often see in main lead characters. And I wanted Eric to kind of be sexy, but still be vulnerable when needed, and when the story kind of calls for it, and when he builds a deeper connection with our female main lead. And so I'm trying not to spoil a lot. However, I want to kind of cover the thought process behind my characters and what I want to do with them. And by the way, I might look down a lot, and that's because I am referencing my script that I wrote. Now, I also wanted in this video to break down my new writing journal with you guys, and there's still not a lot in here yet. However, I have somewhat structured it to some degree to make this a very helpful resource for me as I am finally delving back into writing my own stories. So this is my journal. It is made of leather. I got this from Barnes & Noble. I've had this journal for a couple of months now, and I have also put some stickers on it. So there's this sticker. There's this sticker, and it says in Latin, I believe, "In libris libertas," which means in books there's freedom. It's a quote that I very much resonate with. I feel like education and intellectualism can free us from a lot of things, a lot of misconceptions, misunderstandings, and sometimes learning can be such a powerful tool. So looking at this inspires me to read and inspires me to search for more information and to know more. I also love Greek mythology. I love statues. I love very historical looking things. So, I have stickers of like Hera, Aphrodite, and I also have a sticker of bug, like a fly, and then it says El Tebano. I don't know what this means, but I found it cool. I just sometimes find insects cool. And then I have this moon crescent with a face on it. I find it very whimsical. I don't know. I enjoy looking at whimsical things because it inspires me to write fantasy and write fiction. So I found it cool. So I really love the texture and the feel of this book, because sometimes writing on paper and having a place that kind of gives me inspiration helps me a lot with romanticizing my writing process and motivating me to write further. So yeah, find something that you like that looks pretty. If you're a very aesthetic person like me, find something that looks visually appealing to your eyes to motivate you to write, okay? So it has this little string, and in here you can see there's some tabs, okay? So while I do have these tabs to kind of organize my journal, I just want to preface the fact that I don't always write in these designated tabs. I have a poetry tab, but I have poetry in the front of the book because I feel like writing should be fluid. I should write wherever I feel like, and I'll just add a tab there. I don't really restrict myself. I don't really care. I mean, this belongs to me, and no one else is looking inside of it, so why bother? So I'll just kind of break down some of my tabs, and I'll show some hints and peeks of my journal, but not too much and not too close. Okay. So I have this one tab that says writing. So this is for a tab for when I'm writing like chapters in here, from stories, and I'm like just letting myself go crazy. I have this section right here that says prose, and for those who don't know what a writing prose is, I might not be able to describe it the best, but basically a prose is the way an author explains things. Every author narrates things differently, and you can have a bad prose and a good prose. And in this section, actually, I have notes from a video that I watched on YouTube, and it was basically about how to write a prettier or elevated prose, you could say. And in this section, I also include the reference or the source in which I'm getting this information from. So the video is from Lynn D. Jung. I'll write that there. She has amazing content that helps a lot, and in this video specifically, she even included a Google Doc where she listed a lot of verbs, adjectives, and just words that can help elevate your story. And some of the advice that she gave was wonderful, so I took some notes, and I even wrote like standard sentence structures, things that good prose tend to have, and a bad prose tend to have, all that stuff. Anyways, the second tab right here is the green one. It says grammar, and basically I find sources online, and I study my grammar, I study writing techniques, I study different sentence structures and different things like that. I try to study as much as I can, because I feel like sometimes I struggle with writing because I lack confidence in my skills, because I am not that, I guess, knowledgeable in grammar. I don't know what it is, but some schools really taught grammar in grade school and some schools didn't. And my school just dabbled in it. So as I'm older, I just like to kind of reintegrate that information into my brain and just solidify my understanding about English and stuff, especially as now that I'm in university. It is very important for me as an English major to work and hone my skills as much as I can. The next section I have is a vocabulary section. So here, I write the book title of where I'm getting these vocabulary words from, and I underline the word that I'm defining, the page number, and if I don't know the definition of the word, I write it in a different color. Or if I know the word already, I'll just write the word and the page number so that I know how this word was used. Sometimes I write words that I already know, but it's just words I don't hear as often day to day in movies and books. Sometimes some words, you only really see them in specific instances or in specific books. So it's just good for me to write a word down so that I can remember it better and look back at it. And it also helps me with becoming more eloquent and better communicating. So overall, it's something that I really enjoy to do. So I love my vocabulary section. Another section that I have in this journal is my ideas section. As you can see, this is red tab. I glue some drawings that I make of characters, and here I also brainstorm some chapters for my stories. And sometimes if I'm feeling a little frisky, I will completely start just writing said chapter after writing the bullet points of what will happen in that chapter. So this is very, hold on, I'll be in bed. Sometimes at night I can't sleep, and then I get thoughts of how that chapter should look, so I just grab my journal and I start like writing like a madman at night. It's something that I'm dealing with a lot recently, now that I'm finally regaining my passion for writing and my confidence for writing. So It's great. Sometimes not so great because I want to sleep and then I start writing for like 4 hours at midnight. But hey, better writing than nothing, okay? And then my last two sections are a poetry section and a writing section. So the writing section is for me just drafting stuff, like writing drafts of chapters and stuff like that. And the poetry section is self-explanatory. I write poetry in there. But sometimes I might write poetry in a different section. I might write poetry in some empty pages, whatever I feel like. I don't restrict myself to writing where stuff belongs because why not? Just be free, be fluid, and be a little raunchy. I like to restrict myself in my own journal because no one else is going to read it. So it doesn't matter. Okay? So now I'm going to be discussing some challenges and lessons that I have learned since getting back into writing and since writing this story so thus far, and issues that I had in the past. So I've loved writing since I was a child, and growing up, I was often told I had a lot of raw talent. So that led to me kind of developing certain kind of, I wouldn't say it's an ego, but like a confidence in which I didn't feel like I needed to read much to be a good writer. However, I believe that to be a good writer, you also need to be a good reader. It is so important to read. Read works of amazing voices, of different diverse perspectives, seeing certain literary techniques and stuff firsthand by reading, and like symbolism that can be shown through reading really, really helps with becoming a better writer. And I fought this long tug of war of reading and writing and acting like I had to sacrifice one for the other when they're supposed to be going hand in hand. So my biggest challenge with writing this story after leaving it in the dust for a year was restarting. I felt like there was this point where I was just not ready. I wasn't good enough. I hadn't developed my skills well enough. But the thing is, writing is something that you're supposed to grow with. It's something that gets better with time. And so I had to learn to give myself grace and to not hold myself to this extremely high standard, because I started losing the fun of what initially brought me so much joy. I started basically feeling a sense of dread when it came to writing. Even when it came to writing papers at school, I started feeling like I just wasn't good enough, that there was no point in trying. However, sometimes it's mistakes that teach us a lot, and we gain wisdom through errors. And so I had to realize and change my mindset of being perfect all the time, because nothing is requiring me to be perfect all the time. And that's the only way to make progress, by just making mistakes, being raw, and being unfiltered. And I struggled a lot with wanting my first draft to look like a fifth round of editing final version, and that was very ridiculous. But it was something I genuinely struggled very deeply with. And I feel like a lot of other Gen Z authors, especially with the rise of AI, can kind of develop this deep sense of insecurity and this deep sense of worry and feeling like they're not good enough, or feeling like there's just so many amazing voices in the market that how can I stand out? But the fun thing about writing, the fun thing about reading is how diverse, unique everyone is, and how there's so much to choose from. And that no matter what, there's someone for everyone. Something that I discovered about my writing process and my writing style is that I prefer small goals over big ones. I try to not hold myself to a very high standard, because I feel like pressure makes writing feel daunting for me. So I try to kind of set a small goal for myself each day, or sometimes I don't try to do everything every day. I try to do something at least 3 days a week. So I prefer writing 900 words a day. You know, I might write 300 in the morning, 300 in the afternoon, 300 at night. And so when I kind of choose to set a small goal for myself, it lets myself kind of write with less pressure. And so sometimes I get lost in writing that I tend to subconsciously just kind of indulge further, and so I end up actually going over the goal anyway. But understanding that if one day my cup isn't that full and my energy is low, having that low goal, low pressure kind of environment really helps me a lot for when I do have that motivation and for when I don't have that motivation, because sometimes creativity isn't something that's always linear. And so that helps me a lot, as well as, I really love a short chapter in a book, in a story, writing it myself. I try to at least start most of my stories with decently short chapters to kind of ease people into the story, and then as it gets more juicy, kind of build the length further. So then it's like once you're like 5 chapters in, you already are invested. You know what I mean? That's kind of what a lot of authors that I like to read do. And so I love it. I love a 9-page chapter. Like, that's not a bad thing for me. Now, we're kind of nearing the end of this video, so I want to ask my audience and my fellow writers out there, if you're writing a story, share your progress in the comments down below. I'd love to cheer you on and ask about your characters. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and stay tuned as I'll be sharing more about my writing progress. Bye!